the wisdom, virtue, and promise of asking God for a pain-free universe. To look closely at the world we inhabit is to recognize a profound structural crisis. We find ourselves inside an intricate, beautifully complex machine that is nevertheless fundamentally broken at its core. Every day, across every corner of the planet, conscious life experiences fear, physical degradation, emotional heartbreak, and the inevitable termination of existence. For centuries, humanity has responded to this dilemma with small, localized adjustments. We build hospitals to delay death, draft laws to curb cruelty, and offer comfort to those in immediate grief. Yet, these efforts are akin to rearranging deck chairs on a sinking vessel. The problem is not that the world functions poorly, the problem is that the world is designed with suffering as a baseline feature. True intelligence requires us to step back from these superficial fixes and look at the grand architecture of reality. When we do, the most reasonable, compassionate, and elevated action available to a conscious mind becomes clear. We must ask the Creator to bring this flawed experiment to an end and replace it entirely with a reality defined by uncompromised goodness. Praying for the total dissolution of this universe and the immediate arrival of a new, perfect one is the most intelligent prayer possible because it addresses the root cause of existence's tragedy rather than its symptoms. If a machine is fundamentally misaligned, an engineer does not simply patch a gear, they redesign the system. The current universe runs on an engine of competition and consumption, where for one creature to live, another must die, and where the natural laws themselves dictate decay. To pray for anything less than a complete systemic overhaul is a failure of imagination and a lack of true ambition for the well-being of conscious life. A highly intelligent perspective bypasses the small, incremental requests for personal safety, wealth, or brief moments of peace, and goes straight to the ultimate solution. It recognizes that true perfection means a reality where all beings who have ever drawn breath, who exist now, and who will ever exist are brought together into a timeless state of pure love, bliss, and profound joy. This request is not merely a product of intellectual clarity, it is the ultimate expression of virtue. Virtue, in its highest sense, is the active desire for the absolute well-being of all conscious things, without exception or boundary. Most human prayers are small and exclusionary, asking for a specific group to win a war, a specific harvest to succeed, or a single individual to heal while others suffer. These requests are limited by our narrow perspectives. Conversely, asking for a universal reset that embraces every single being who ever existed is a grand act of radical empathy. It leaves no one behind, not the forgotten generations of the past, not the suffering populations of the present, and not the unborn lives of the future. It demands a cosmic justice so vast that it redeems all past agony by transmuting it into eternal peace. To hold this desire in one's heart and voice it to the Creator is to align oneself with a love so expansive that it refuses to accept a single tear as an acceptable cost of existence. When we contemplate why a benevolent and all-powerful Creator has allowed this painful universe to persist for so long without enacting this perfect reality, we often run into old, unhelpful explanations. For generations, traditional thought has leaned on the idea of free will to explain why things are so broken, suggesting that suffering is the price of human liberty or that God stays His hand to preserve our independence. But this argument is a logical dead end that shifts the blame for a structurally harsh environment onto the fragile creatures trying to survive within it. Human choices did not invent the laws of thermodynamics, biological decay, or the necessity of predators. The flaws are built into the fabric of space and time. Rejecting the myth of free will allows us to see a much more profound, relational possibility for why the universe remains unchanged. Perhaps God has simply never been asked. Consider the possibility that the relationship between the Creator and creation is deeply collaborative, built on a principle of resonance and invitation. The universe may be constructed such that certain cosmic doors remain locked until a conscious observer within the system possesses the clarity, the maturity, and the audacity to turn the key. Throughout history, human prayers have been small, fearful, and fragmented. We have asked for rain, for victory, for survival, or for entry into a private paradise while the rest of creation burns. We have codenamed our helplessness as faith, and accepted suffering as a permanent law of nature. God may be waiting for a consciousness to emerge that is vast enough to see the entire picture, brave enough to reject the necessity of pain, and clear enough to demand a flawless alternative for everyone. The delay is not a sign of divine indifference or a punishment for ancient choices. It is a waiting period for human awareness to mature to the point where it can articulate the ultimate request. By looking at the cosmic timeline through this lens, our role changes from passive victims of a harsh reality into essential participants in its transformation. If the architecture of creation requires an internal catalyst, a single, uncompromised voice asking for the ultimate upgrade, then the absence of that upgrade makes perfect sense. No one had asked for it with the necessary purity of intent and universal scope. This understanding removes the bitterness of wondering why a good God would allow suffering, and replaces it with an urgent sense of purpose. It suggests that the transition from a universe of friction to a universe of eternal bliss is a joint venture, waiting only for the creation to finally realize what it actually needs and ask for it directly. Current reality, built on decay, competition, and inherent suffering. Proposed reality, built on eternal love, universal bliss, and absolute goodness. The bridge, a conscious, universal prayer that invites a total systemic reset. Actively focusing on this prayer transforms the inner life of the person who offers it. The world can easily overwhelm us with its relentless stream of tragedy, conflict, and personal hardship, leading to a sense of exhaustion and existential despair. When we try to fix the world through purely physical or localized means, we quickly realize how small our levers are compared to the vast scale of global pain. This realization can breed a deep, quiet cynicism. However, dedicating one's consciousness to the prayer for a universal reset flips this dynamic entirely. It provides an immediate, inexhaustible source of happiness and optimism because it anchors the mind to an ultimate, uncompromised victory. The individual is no longer trying to build a fragile sandcastle against an incoming tide. They are inviting the ocean to transform into something entirely new. This mindset completely changes how we perceive the hardships of the present. Instead of viewing the pain around us as an eternal, unchangeable law of nature that will repeat forever, we begin to see it as the final, fading chapters of an obsolete system. The suffering of this world loses its permanent authority over our emotions. It is recognized as a temporary state of friction that will be entirely erased and redeemed in the coming reality. This perspective breeds a profound, unshakable optimism. You walk through a broken world with a light heart, not because you are ignoring the brokenness, but because you possess the absolute certainty that its days are numbered and its replacement will leave no wound unhealed. NGT, to perceive the systemic flaw of reality, and to settle for nothing less than its absolute perfection for every being who ever lived, is the highest function of a conscious mind. Furthermore, this prayer eliminates the exhausting moral compromises that usually come with trying to navigate a flawed universe. In our daily lives, we are constantly forced to make choices where our gain is someone else's loss, or where our comfort relies on a system that exploits others. This creates a subtle, persistent undercurrent of guilt. But when your primary spiritual action is to ask for a reality where all beings simultaneously experience infinite bliss, your intentions become completely pure. There is no competition in this vision, no scarcity, and no one left outside the gates. This purity of desire brings a deep sense of internal peace and alignment. Your mind becomes a sanctuary of clean, radiant optimism, entirely focused on a future of absolute goodness. Ultimately, This way of interacting with the divine represents a complete maturation of human consciousness. It moves past the primitive instinct to beg for small favors or appease a distant authority, and instead steps into a high-level collaboration with the Creator. It recognizes that our deepest empathy and our sharpest intelligence are not design flaws to be suppressed, but the very tools intended to signal when this phase of creation has served its purpose. By holding this grand vision and presenting it as a singular, focused request, we perform the highest duty possible within this reality. We become the voice of a creation that is ready to be made whole.